And then we'll get into the next topic, which is all about values and replacement values. And so while this publishes, let me just explain to you for a moment about what a value is versus a replacement value. And a value object is one of the objects in the left pane of the UI designer, and it's used to output results or data from the current run. And then replacement values allows you to do the same sort of thing, but in line inside of a text component. But here we go, we've logged in, and we've got our blank simulation. And so I'm just going to start a new run, finish it, and just go to the debrief screen and make sure everything in that is all right. And yep, by default we failed, because if you remember, the default run in the model had us failing in about year 2032. And if we play again and we set this to a low number, I believe we'll have our success, or we'll be close. Okay. I don't remember the exact number which led to success, but you can trust me that this method is appropriate. So let me jump back, though, to the user interface designer and get back into the second topic, which is all about values and replacement values. So let's say we wanted to put on the screen what the current time of the simulation was. You know, it's something that's fairly common. Because right now, if we look at our game page, the only way to tell what time in the simulation you're in is to look at contextual clues, like where the lines are in the user interface or what data table rows are being showed. So let's say we wanted to have up here where it says the simulation, it's say, you know, you're in year X, whatever year you're currently in. The easiest way to do that is to use a value object. We can drag it out like this, and then it gives us access to whole bunches of simulation state. So since we want to print out what the run's time is, we select in the type drop-down box the run object, and then the property field time, and it prints out what the current time of the simulation is. Fairly straightforward, fairly easy. Now this is a big shortcut, essentially for a thing called replacement values, because if you look at this, I can't type anything else into it. All it does is print out a number. So let's say I wanted to say the simulation is in year 2040. This object doesn't work very well. So let's just put the replacement value over here for a second. And the value, and let me show you a replacement value. So rather than this saying the simulation, let's have it say, you know, you are in year, and then what do we type here? There's nothing that we can put in here right now that says, you know, replace this with the year that you're currently in. But we have this pane down here called the replacement values, which you'll find super useful for doing things like this. So we go down here, and it looks exactly like the value object settings pane. And we can select the run, and then a property in the run, like the time, and we add it to this list. And what you'll see here is it gives us an ID, bracket $1, and then it gives us, you know, what type it is and what property it is. So run time. So now, if we type that little ID that it gave us into the text box, we get what the current year is. So now, you know, we can just write this stuff in line, and it'll appear perfectly. So if the year is 2040 versus 10 million, the text will word wrap appropriately. So here now, I'm just going to get rid of the word hello. And so now it says, you know, you're in the year 2040. So something else that might be really useful to show people is who they are when they're playing the simulation. Because as a facilitator and administrator, sometimes you get really confused as to who the heck you actually are when you're logging in, logging out. Am I user X, user B? You know, so let's put the user's name in the upper right-hand corner. To do that, I can change my value object to report user data and then my full name. And so if I go here, we can see my, my big long name. And so I'm actually going to make it a little bit smaller for people like me who have big, long names. Set it back to size 12, maybe 14 text, and line it up with the logout button. So what we can do now is log out Billy Schoenberg. Great. So now what we want to do is, since we have this logout stuff repeated on many different pages, let's just take that and copy and paste it through. Okay. So just again to reiterate, as we publish this simulation, a value object is a shortcut. It's a very easy way to just put a little piece of simulation state on the screen. And all of the pieces of information that you can put are listed inside the type drop-down box. And then in the property drop-down box is the specific piece of data that you can put on the screen. The replacement values inside of the text component, those are like regular value objects but on steroids. Those you can throw into any piece of text to give contextual clues inside of the text. So here now we're looking at our screen and it says, manage runs, Billy Schoenberg. And if I create a new run, you're in year 2012, Billy Schoenberg. And I can continue to step this model, and that's just going to update as we go forward. And so now, I can set it to a different number, finish. And I think this time we'll actually get our success. Oh, I was short again. I guessed wrong. Alrighty, and so now you can see here that our replacement values are working appropriately. So then, what I want to show you now is something that I glossed over a bit last time as we put it together. If you remember the debrief button, inside of that we were using some strange bracket $sign variables. If you remember, inside of the conditionals here, we were hiding this button until the end of the simulation. So if we jump to the conditionals, and let me just edit this one, you can see here we've got this, this weird syntax here. This bracket $sign run.step is less than bracket $sign run.endstep. And so last week I blew through this and I just went through real quick because I wasn't ready to explain to you what was going on behind the scenes here. But now you can see, after you've seen the replacement value, you've seen this syntax before. You've seen this bracket $sign. And what these are is they're default variables. These are variables that you can type into any text input, any input that accepts text, and their value will be replaced by the value of that actual piece of information. So if we look here, we have a whole bunch of these bracket $sign variables. So here we've got our range name, and it'll print out for the selected subscripts within that range, the label and the value. But then we've got all sorts of other information, like the end step, the end time, the run's ID, all of this other state information, the step, what time we're in, formatted to look appropriately. We have all bunches of information about the user. If this was a multiplayer simulation, we'll get into this next week, the user's role. So as you can see here, these bracket $sign variables is really how you get into a whole lot of the stateful information that's contained within Forio Simulate. So I'm just going to put this back, though, to the way that it was so that it continues to function as it was before. So just to give you a clue in one more time on that is I can replace this $1 with run.time, and it does the same thing. So those little bracket $sign variables are usable in any text input. But let's keep this the way that it was. And so that's just a little treatise there on replacement values, and default variables. What I want to jump to now is some advanced reporting features. So I want to get into showing more insight into the data using some of our more advanced charting components. So what I want to do, just real quick, is I want to add a new page where we can put down a nice animated bubble chart, which will show us, or our users, how our data is changing over time. So I'm going to add a new page, and I'm just going to call it More Results. And I'm going to link to it from back inside the game page. So let's move our debrief button over to the right, because remember, we want that all the way on the edge, because that gets enabled and disabled. And so it would look weird if there was just a big hole in our user interface. So I'm going to drag out a new button, and I'm going to link that button back to the More Results page. And so I go into the Actions pane, just like I was doing last week, and I select Go to Page, More Results. And on this page is where we're going to want to put our bubble chart. So let's copy our header over again. And paste that down there. Perfect. Let's grab out a button just quickly so that we can get back to our other page, maintain all of our navigation throughout the simulation. Great. And then now let's go ahead and let's explore the bubble chart for just a few minutes here. So I drag out the bubble chart from the charts, tables, and data, and I place it down on the page. And it looks like just any other chart here, except here on the left pane, in the series panel, we have these 3 variables that need to be graphed. And so a bubble chart is kind of like a scatter chart, an XY plot, but on it we can control the size of the dots. So what differentiates the bubble chart from the scatter chart is this size variable, which is what's used to calculate the relative size of the bubbles to each and every other bubble. And so I did a little bit of research onto what a good bubble chart in this simulation would be. And what I found is that if we put the yearly spending ratio on one of our appliances on the X, and then on the Y we put the average size of that same appliance, and then what controls the size of that bubble is the years to replace the appliance. What we end up with is a really nice bubble on the screen like that. And so what we're looking at right now is a bubble chart that goes over time that's showing historical values for the entire simulation. So when you type in 0 like that, it shows all of the historical data that it has. And what you'll see here is that these bubbles, they fade away as time gets further and further in the past. So let me just show you an example here, and let's just go to single point. And here's that a single bubble. When we go over time, we see all the bubbles. And the reason why that bubble is moving around is the axes on the chart are changing based on where the bubbles are so that we don't clip any of them off. Because what ends up happening is we have 30 or something steps in the simulation, so there's a bunch more invisible bubbles that you can't really see here because they've just been alphaed out so far that they're just about invisible. But if you were paying real attention here just a second ago, you see that there's a third option here, which is animated. And this is where some of the really cool stuff comes in. Because what you can do now with this is you can scrub this, this slider down here over time and see how that bubble moves across the graph. And so now what we can do is we can specify, show us just the past, I don't know, show us, 40 years worth of historical data here. Oops, hit the wrong button. And we have a nice little bubble there. So if we track it through, we can see that bubble moving across the screen. And so now what we want to do is we want to add a couple of more series to show how the other of our products move around the screen. And so then let's just follow the same format, the yearly spending on the yearly spending ratio for the freezer, the average size for the freezer, and then for our size variable, our years to replace appliance, freezer. And then let's add our final series for the basement refrigerator. And for that, again, the yearly spending ratio for the refrigerator, the average size of the refrigerator, and the years to replace the refrigerator. And great. So now we have our 3 bubbles there on this graph, and they'll all move in unison when we simulate. And so now what I want to do is I just want to show you, well, first off, let me move this legend and turn it into a vertical legend, because it's really quite long the way it is right now. Okay. And then again, those legend names are kind of awkward because they have those brackets in them. So let's just quickly get rid of that by changing the series name to what the series actually represents. But what I want to show you next is how to customize some of your charts to change the way that they look and the way that they feel so that you can customize essentially how your simulation looks. So if you want to create a bunch of sims, you can create a common look and feel across them. Okay, so now our legend is a lot better off. Let's make our graph a lot bigger. And so what we can come down here and do is in the Styles pane, we can play with some of these settings over here, like the grid color, for instance. And so now it's a little bit easier to tell where these bubbles fall between the lines, and then an alternate grid color. And so now we have a nice set of background to help us differentiate between the different values on the X and Y axes. So now we can see how these bubbles are moving over time a whole lot easier. We can pick up on where these bubbles are within the axes values that we've laid out. And what I normally like to do is actually put the darker grid color on top and the lighter grid color on bottom. I just feel that makes the universe looks a little bit better. But that's a personal opinion and choice, but this is the way I prefer. And so now here we have our bubble chart, and we can simulate it over time, and we can see how all of those bubbles move. And so you noticed here that one of them was moving separate than all of the others, and that's because it's the refrigerator which was being affected by the values that we entered into the simulation when we ran it last time, because the current run that the UI designer is showing is the last run that we ran. And so down here, there's a whole lot more options on how to customize our chart to make it look the way that we want. So we can play with some of the alphas on the series. So this becomes really useful when you have area charts. And a lot of these settings, in fact, most of them are common across all the different charts. We can change the animation time, so how long it takes for that slider bar to move across. We can change all of the fonts, all of the labels, things like that, so that this chart fits within the simulation that we designed here. So now let's just publish this simulation and see what it looks like to our users. What are our users going to see when they come and they play this simulation? And just as a side note, this kind of chart, when I put it in my sim, it always wows people. But what you got to be really careful about with this chart is that you're actually showing something meaningful. It's really easy to just throw a whole bunch of things on the X and Y axes that don't actually mean anything. You could just put down silly values which don't actually provide any insight to your data. So something like a little, top tip would be avoid visualizations or flashy visualizations that have flash just for the sake of flash. Always make sure that there's at least some reason why you're doing it. Otherwise, you'll find pretty quickly that you'll actually end up confusing people more than you end up teaching people about whatever concept you're trying to show. So let's quickly change our refrigerator around a little bit. Let's set our kilowatt of electricities around. This way we can get some different behavior for the refrigerator bubble as opposed to the other bubbles in the freezer and the basement refrigerator. Okay, so if we go back here now to more results, our bar shows us where we're at in the simulation, and we can run it here. And we can see, that we have an outlier over here that happens sometimes, and we can scrub through this and try and find out exactly when that, and there it is. And that's where our outlier shows up. And in 2014, we must have made a decision that caused the refrigerator's values to be skewed. And so then we can run this game to the end and play all of our results. And we can see that our refrigerator is vastly different, has a vastly different behavior track than our freezer and our basement refrigerator. And so that there for you is the animated bubble chart, which is one of the cooler ways to do advanced reporting, as long as you've got good reason for it. Again, try not to get caught up in the flashiness of it, but what we're actually showing. And I must admit I got caught up a little bit in the flashiness of it for this particular demo because I'm not sure exactly what the meaning of that comparison is. Okay, so now what I want to show you a bit about is faculty stuff and administration. So what we're building towards right now is actually the ability to set up scenarios for different groups of users. So let's say you're running a workshop and you have two teams who are competing against each other. And you have one team that comes in the morning and one team that comes in the afternoon. And what you want to make sure is that the team in the morning doesn't tell the team in the afternoon how the simulation works. So one of the things that you're going to want to do is change some of the simulation values so that when the team in the afternoon plays the game, it doesn't have the exact same parameters as the team in the morning. But it's actually still based on the same model. They log in to the same user interface. And these are the kinds of things that you control using administration screens. So let's go ahead and actually start building them. And to do that, I'm going to want to make a screen for my administration screens, and I'll call this my admin. And now we're going to want to go ahead and change our login settings. So if you remember last week, we had some login settings on the login components. So when a facilitator logs into the simulation, we're going to want to bring them to the admin now, as opposed to bringing them throughout the rest of the game. And then the same thing for the on-load simulation options. We're going to want to bring facilitators to the admin pages as opposed to the manage runs pages. And so now on my admin, I can start adding some components down that'll help me first review results from the current group of students that I'm looking at, and then as well to get started on some of the stuff with setting up those scenarios. So let's go here now, and let's just add down a tab navigator. And I like using tab navigators on administration screens because you don't really need to navigate around from page to page all that much because you want everything in one quick, easy to get to spot. But there's a lot of content that's got to fit on that page. And a tab navigator is a good way to show only the relevant content that the admin or the user needs at the time that they need it. And so here we're going to have a tab for the class summary. And this tab is going to show us how our class is doing, or how our current group of students is doing, or how all the people who have run the simulation so far have done, anybody who's saved a run. And so now you should be thinking, okay, I want to be showing saved runs. The component that you want to do to show saved runs, of course, is the run table. So let's grab one of those out, throw it down inside of our class summary page. And then very similar to the table that we've laid out over here in the manage runs, we're going to lay out inside of the admin. But what makes it different here is that Simulate can tell when the user is logged in as a facilitator versus when the user is logged in as just a regular user. And so when you're a regular user, all that table is going to show you is your runs that belong to you. But when you're a facilitator, you have special permissions. You can see runs for anybody who's in your group or in your class. So what that means is facilitators can see data that's not only theirs, but belongs to others, whereas users can only see data that belongs to themselves. So what we want to do quickly is just add in a column to show us whose run this is. And then we want to show when this run was created. And then we want to show what time that run is in. So is this run complete or not? And then after that, we want to show what the name of the run is. Because remember, all the people who go through the debrief screens are forced to both name and describe their runs. And then we want to show the description that those people type into the simulation. And then finally, we're going to want to show some of the results they have, as well as the ability to view that run and delete that run. So if we go through this box, we can pick total yearly spending. And then let me make this just a little bit wider. and then the view run column and the delete run column. And so now what we have here is a great screen for our facilitators or our administrators to use to figure out what's going on in this simulation and to debrief it as well as explore results, things like that. This gives facilitators who are responsible for a group of people going through the simulation insight into how those people are doing. And great. And so now what we want to do is we want to make it so that facilitators can also view the game. Because something that's really annoying if you're a facilitator is forcing yourself to have to log out and then log back in as a dummy user to actually view simulation results or to play the game yourself. Because a lot of the time our facilitators are also our authors. And what we want to do for these people to make their lives a whole lot easier is actually add in a button which allows them to just get off this screen and view the game for itself. So let's go here and add just a go-to page action and bring them to the Manage Run screen. And so what this allows our facilitators to do is go ahead and view the game. But now what we've done is we've created a one-way navigation. As a facilitator, you can get to this page, but you can never get back. And that's never very good. You want your facilitators to always be able to get back to the screens that they need the most to do their jobs. And so what we can do is actually use a button to link back to this page. But what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to use this little template thing down here. And so these are our templates within the UI Designer. Any component that we put on this page will appear on any other page which uses this template. So let's just throw down an ugly button here. And on this button, we'll say View Admin. And so now if we go back to our admin page, we've got that View Admin button. Our Manage Runs page, we got that View Admin button. And the reason for that is if you click that little settings widget, we're using template 1 as the template for this page. Now, though, think about this. If I'm a user and I log into the simulation, do I want my users to be able to see the admin? Heck no. So what we need to do is we need to fix that. We need to make it so that that button only shows up for our facilitators. And there's a really quick and easy way to do this. Yeah, you could do it with conditionals, and you can spend a few minutes checking against bracket $user is facilitator. But that's too much of a pain in the butt. And so what we've done is on all components in the size, position, and tooltip option down here, we've made this button visible to facilitator only. You check that on, and the only people who can see that button now are facilitators. And it saves us just a ton of hassle, because now we've put down one button on one page. It shows up on all pages for all the people that we needed to show up for. And then you may be thinking to yourself, well, Billy, look here on the login screen, we have a View Admin button. You know, that's no good. We don't want that there. But if we think about it for a moment, you don't actually become a facilitator until you log into the simulation. So that button is invisible and not on that page anyway. So even though it shows up here, since there's no way to get to the login page as a logged-in user, that button's never actually going to show up there. So now, you know, crisis averted. You know, we can call the Army Reserve back, and we can publish the simulation and take a look and see how it looks. Yeah, so that visible to facilitator only, it's a real lifesaver. It makes a big difference when you don't want to have to go ahead and use conditionals on components across multiple pages. And so now here we've got our great View Admin button. Oh, I just thought of something. I realized I never actually hooked that button up to do anything. I got so excited and carried away with how to place that button on the page that I never actually hooked it to anything. So let's go ahead and quickly solve that problem. All right now. So let's go ahead here. And on our template, let's go back to that button. And on this button, we're going to want to do go to page, the admin page. Perfect. And so now, I guess while we're here again, let me just talk a little bit more about templates. So you'll notice that we had been copying and pasting a bunch of stuff from page to page across pages. And this would actually be a great place to put a bunch of that stuff. And so what we could do is all of this stuff where it's showing us this logout and our name, we can move that to the template as well. So let's cut that off this page, and let's delete it off the others. And let's just quickly put that back onto our template. Okay, great. Now, the only thing is that, in fact, what I was talking about before with the login page is actually a problem, because it's going to show a not logged in user and a logout button on the login page. So let's actually just quickly create a second template, and we'll just call this one blank, and we'll call this one master, because this is the one that's going to be used on every page. And on the login page, we'll just set it to use the blank template as opposed to the master template. And now the problem's solved. And so templates are a great way to reduce what can sometimes be the monotony of laying out lots and lots and lots of components. Put as much of the common functionality as possible onto a template and have your pages use those templates so you don't have to lay out hundreds of components again and again and again. And so good, we got that going. We've got a little bit of overlap because we've got some stuff on a template and then some stuff on the page. And you'll notice that stuff on a template is always in the back. It always has the lowest z-index. It's always furthest away from the user. Anything you put on a page is always going to come up on top. So if we go back to the view game, we can go back now as an admin to view admin. And we're set again. And so what we can see here now is all of our results. And if we click on that result here, we can see over time how we did in that run, as well as overtime data in a table for how that run went. And then we can copy that run to the clipboard and paste it into Excel or something like that. And so this is a good way to just get more in-depth information on runs by clicking on the results here. So here, we can see we had some jitters, and it's just a feature that's built in to the run table. And then, of course, I don't know if I showed you this last time, but you can name the runs right here on the fly. And so, that is now the name of the run. I believe I hit a wrong button there. No worries about that. Okay, great. So let's go back now, and let's add some more functionality around setting up of those scenarios. So let's get back to our eventual goal here, which was to be able to have people run through this simulation in groups and have different scenarios show up for those groups. And so what we can do here now is we can add a new tab to our tab navigator. First, let me just move that button out of the way. Okay. And we can add some more tabs to our tab navigator. And so let's call this our scenario setup. And on this, we're going to get into some, I added a new tab called tab 0. Let me just kill that. There we go. And so now what we can do here is actually get into some of the advanced ways of setting decisions. Because what facilitators do to create these scenarios that their students will run through is they make a whole bunch of decisions, and then they set them as the model default for a group of people. And so let's just start out by putting down some of those decision components. Let's start out with a drawable line chart. And this is a pretty cool component. This is kind of like, if you're familiar with Vensim, the ability to draw in a lookup table. And what it allows us to actually do is draw in behavior over time. And so if you remember, when you were creating the model with Michael, and let's actually jump over to the model here. I notice the variable that we're looking for isn't actually in our results. Is this price of electricity. So if you remember this was an array graph that was interpolating over 0 to 5. So we had these 5 values that went from 0.11 to 0.18, and these were just a hard-coded assumption. So why not make that hard-coded assumption a facilitator changeable decision? That way we can use this to change the results that will happen for each group, but there will still have the same story in the model. So I just quickly changed that V to a D so that I could actually set that variable as a decision. So we jump down here. Oh, I grabbed the admin page to reorder it by mistake. Let me pull up the chart here. And here is our price of kilowatt of electricity. And so there we have now our array and our 6 values that are there. And right now it says by default time, because most of these tables are by default over time. And so I'm going to leave that alone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace those values with some custom x-axis labels. Since 1 through 5 doesn't really mean all that much to people, let's actually put down what the true range actually is, which is 2010 to 2040. And so now here, this is the custom x-axis label function, which is usable on just about every chart here. And what it does is it labels from left to right the labels that will appear at the bottom of this graph. So now we can see here that we're going from 2010 to 2040 just in groups of 5, because that's the way that the array was set up. So if we wanted to set a value for each year, rather than using an array index that went from 0 to 5, we would do it to go from 0 to 40. But I'm going to keep it from 0 to 5 right now just because I don't want to type out 40 different numbers. And next, what I want to do with this is there's this option here called Snap to Grid. And sometimes that's useful. Sometimes, you want people to be able to set numbers exactly as they appear on the y-axis. But in this case, we don't want to do that. We don't want to force people to have to set values to either 0.25, 0.50, 0.75, or 1.00. And thinking about that, those are actually a little high. So let's, rather than auto-calculate the maximum, let's set the maximum price kilowatt of electricity to something a little bit lower so that we can have a little bit more precision when we're setting this drawable line graph. Great. And so now we've got our drawable line graph set up. And the next thing that I want to set up with you guys is that new feature that I was talking about, adding dragging and dropping behaviors into your own simulation. And what we can do is we can use what's called a Frag Destination. And so what this is it's a box. Think of it as an empty little box that you can put things in. And as you put things into the box, it sets decisions in the model. So what we're going to want to do is add a little piece of text to explain to people how this works. And so the decision that we want to be changing here is the number of households in the state. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to drag in a picture of a person into this box, and each person is going to represent 1 million people. So let's make this text a little bit bigger. That's a little too big. That's a lot better. And let's just do that. Okay, great. Then let's add in the little picture of a person. So we can drag an image out, place it on the screen like so, and we can upload some images. And you see here I've got this person JPEG all ready to go. And here he is. And so what we're going to want to do with this person is we're going to want to use him as a drag source. He's going to be somebody that we're going to be allowed to pick up off the page and put to another spot on the page. And then we're going to want to keep this drag copy selected. What drag copy means is that you can do it many times. So you can drag the same image 5 times, 10 times, 100 times, as many times as you want. If we took it off, what would happen is the image would disappear after the first time that you dragged it. And then we have this option down here, whether or not to restore it when the simulation goes one step into the future, or just when the simulation is reset. So essentially, are you allowed to drag it just once per simulation or once per step? And in our case, we actually want to drag copy. We want to be able to drag in as many times as we want. And then we can customize what image we want to display as we're doing the dragging. In this case, we want to keep the person as the person as we're dragging that person, if that makes any sense. I said person so many times. So let's go back to our drag destination and actually configure that. And so our drag destination has this layout types option. So we can align all of these people as randomly according to where they've been dropped by the person, vertically, up and down, or horizontally. I like the horizontal for this case because we want to have 5 people standing next to each other when we have 5 million people. And then what we want to do is use as a drag source this image, and we want to set and we haven't made the number of people in millions a variable that we can set in our model. So let's save where we are right now and go back and let's make another addition to our model, which is actually the ability to set the number of households in the state. And there we go here. And so here we want to go find this, and right now it's 5 million. And so we're going to want to keep this as a variable, and we're just going to want to multiply 1 million, that's 100,000 million, times the households, and let's make that variable in the model. So we're going to start out with 5 million people in the state. And so what that means is when the facilitator goes to this page, they're going to see 5 people standing in that box. And so great. So now what we can do is we can configure our drag destination to actually set that variable every time a person image is dragged into the box. And number of households in millions, add. So when we drag in fimage 47, which you can find out that ID by going to size, position, and tooltip, fimage 47. When we drag that into the box, it's going to set the number of households in millions. And so the final thing we need to do to make it so that this run is applied to all other runs from here on forward is we need to add an action to a button called set default. So what this button is going to do is it's going to take this run that we've set up as a facilitator and set it as the default run for anybody who runs the simulation again. And so if I go here, I go to actions. I need reset vars because what we want to do is we want to reset the simulation so that it's in time 0. And then we want a set default action. And set scenarios, start timer, stop timer, step to next, set interface. There we go. And so that is that. So if we publish now, what we're going to be able to do is drag that drawable line chart and drag people into the box to change the number of households in millions. And so here now we can drag these people into the box, or we can take them out of the box. And then we can set that as the default run. And so now that means that all people are going to start the simulation with 3 million people. If we change this, we can change the price of electricity to be, to take whatever shape we want. And so that means anybody who runs the simulation now is going to have this as their price of electricity over time. And so now what I want to do is I actually want to show you a bit about how all of this stuff is put together, the other way of building interfaces within Forio Simulate. So we focused for the past 2 sessions very heavily on the user interface designer. What I want to show you next is actually our REST-based APIs. And so I'm going to just take this URL, which is the URL for some of our API documentation. And so this we can actually distribute to you if you want. You just have to ask us, and we'll give you permission so that you can log in to see them here. And so here now is all of our API documentation. So Simulate is built on top of a bunch of REST-based APIs. And these are APIs that make it very simple to communicate back and forth between the server and the client. It makes it very easy to get data from Simulate and use it in any way, shape, or form you want. And so this is some of the specifications about how those APIs work. Let me right now show you a simple API call. So what we can do is we can replace the Simulate with API/run. And what it's going to do for us here, not the Simulate. And what it's going to do for us here is print out the current state of the run. So this is JSON, which is a little bit hard to read, but it's great for computer programmers. So what I can do is I can give back the data as XML. So what we can see here now is how the UI designer is built, how it talks to the server. So here's information about the current run. And right now you can see here that we've got a random seed. It's got an ID. You can see that I'm the person who's logged in right now. And this data can be consumed by anybody who has an internet connection and used in any way, shape, or form that you want. Then what we can do here is show some more data about and results. So what I did here is I'm now retrieving data for the second page in the simulation, and we can see here that I have all of these results here. I've got this success variable, which this page needs in order to function, and I have the current value for it, which is 1.0 in time 2010. So these are the REST-based APIs as just using them through the URLs. What I can also show you is actually a little HTML page that uses them. So if I come here to my desktop, I have inside of the workshop just a simple HTML page, which if I open up inside of my text editor, we can take a look at for a second. So that's a little big. So what this does is it talks to the APIs using HTML, and it builds a table of results. So using jQuery, a very popular JavaScript library, we're able to call out to these APIs over here and get run results. And so what we can do is we can actually upload this file into Simulate using this Files tab over here. And I can upload a file, and I've got just a simple uploader over here, and I can select the data.html and upload it to the page. And then what we need to do is we need to edit it a little bit to tell this file where our simulation is. So I can just click on the file within the file manager, and I get this nice editor, which allows me to quickly change some of the parameters inside of this file. So we can see here that this simulation right now is hooked up to a simulation done by the user Will Glass. And what we actually want to do is hook it up to our simulation over here done by me. So Billy, and then Jevon's Paradox, week 4-1. And then within this HTML file is actually these same tags a couple of times. And so I need to replace them there as well. And then the final place here where we do the get on the API. Okay, and so we can save these changes now. And now I can actually just go ahead and load that page. And not API run. So here now we're in step 0, and I can change how we want the model to run. And so we can see here, as we run the simulation, we're building results in HTML. So obviously this is the most simple form possible for using HTML. And this is how you would, for instance, right now, design a simulation that would run on an iPad, or design a simulation that you can't necessarily do inside of the Simulate user interface designer. And so what I want to do right now is actually pause for a few minutes and answer some of your questions, as well as show a couple of challenges on the screen for next week as I answer some of these questions. So one of the questions I got is, what if some of the user's simulations are not completed? And I'm guessing that means in reference to the run table. And so what it'll do is, in the run table, as long as the user has hit save sometime in the course of them running the simulation, it'll actually show up in the run table, and it'll just show that it's in year 2030 as opposed to 2040. And then to the user, if the user views that run inside of a run table and there's a resume run button within that table, they'll actually be able to restart that run exactly where they left it off and finish it. And the next question I got is, if the admin resets the number of households, will it affect the incomplete runs? And the answer to that is no. So these are separate things. Once a run is created, it's no longer affectable using that set default run action. So what that set default run action does is it actually changes the run that's created when somebody does a reset or a reset vars. It makes sure that any new run created from that point forward is based on and has the decisions of and looks exactly like that base or default run. And so let me just quickly here in our last 2 minutes talk about some of the challenges that I want you guys to look at for next week. And that is, let's see if we could extend the simulation by adding more interactivity for users. What else could users do in the simulation besides decide efficiency mandates? What other things are there that we can add to our model, for instance, that would make this a bit more of a compelling game? Then what I'd like you guys to also do is build a simulation using two components that we haven't yet covered. So we've covered a fair amount of components within the UI Designer. The good ones that I want you guys to try and take a look at would be an indicator and the slider decision. Now, the indicator is a component which allows you to show how a variable is trending, if it's going up, if it's going down, if it's not changing. And then the slider decision is an alternate method for entering user input. Then coming along next week, just to give you a preview on what's coming in your future, we're going to do some multiplayer game design. And on that, we're going to talk a little bit about multiplayer vocabulary. So there's a whole bunch of words that we all use when we talk about multiplayer that I feel is really important for you guys to understand. Some modeling techniques that will really help when you're building multiplayer games. Also, we'll get into creating users and teams within your simulation. So how do I upload users? How do I give them a role? We'll talk about techniques for advancing simulations and resetting simulations, especially multiplayer ones. And we'll also talk about how to add chat into your simulations. And as the tagline says, we'll build a basic multiplayer game which can be used as a template for all of your own. So next week we're actually going to, I think, break from the Jevons paradox model and just use the most basic, simple model possible, just so that you get an idea of how multiplayer works without having to think about the model. And then finally, if you ever need any help, please don't be afraid to ask. We've got the help forum. As always, we'll be sending out the link to the presentation, the images used in the sim, link to the copy and view model. And we're also, we owe you the video from last week. We've had just a little bit of issue getting that uploaded in a way that we feel would be most useful for you all. So we're going to give you all of those materials as well. I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves today. I know I have. Go ahead and have a great day, and good luck in all of your future simulation endeavors. Have a good one. Bye-bye.